What's up, YouTube, you guys and ladies? The Joel Embiid Nikola Jokic debate. Mm. If I can just express to you how much this debate annoys me. Now, I get it's an important debate. For some people, it's who's the best big man in the league. I understand. I remember going back years, back to when Olajuwon first came into the league, and when Olajuwon would dog the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was at the end of his career back in the '86 playoffs. I remember. It's Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson. Are they better than McHale and Parrish? And goes back. And when Shaq came, I remember. Was Shaq better than David Robinson? The Admiral. Was Pat Ewing even on their level? What about Olajuwon? Then when Alonzo Mourning and those guys came, and Dikembe Mutombo, who were defensive stalwarts, who weren't the offensive guys, you still had these debates. It started to die down really after that era, where you had guys like Dwight Howard come into the league. And then really Dwight Howard played in a league where you had virtually no dominant centers whatsoever. There were a few years where an Andrew Bynum came with those Lakers in the early 2000s or mid 2000s and put up somewhat of an argument. The truth is, the league hasn't seen this type of level of skill at the center spot in a very long time, and one could argue they never have seen anything like Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. It's possible. I would say I agree, but with a caveat, but I believe there's reasons with it. I believe the truth is the way the game is played today has added as much to that as these guys are skillful. Like, I don't believe that people are just more skillful now than they were back then. I'll put it this way, I do, but I don't. The game, the way it was played and the way the game is structured, there's always a hierarchy. And of course, it's the coaches, it's management. Their belief goes into a lot of what you see. In other words, Wilt Chamberlain, actually, in Bill Russell, if you look at some of their plays, there were times when these guys were actually able to bring the ball up, dribbling quite decently, though dribbling was a little bit more difficult in general back then because you weren't allowed to double dribble and palm the ball. Put it this way. Many of the ways in which our players dribble now would be called palming violations back then. So centers weren't allowed to dribble. Like, even if, say, a Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain could dribble, centers aren't allowed to do so. So this adds to, these guys appearing to be much more skillful. It's not a matter of those guys necessarily couldn't do it. We don't know. It's just a question mark. But if someone was to say these guys are more skillful, that's fine. Because it's the previous generation that sets the stage for the next generation to try and top. And this is what led to that. This is why shooting is much more better than it is now. That's the one thing that's different. These guys are much, much, much better shooters than you had back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, without a doubt. And anyway, back to the issue at hand. Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid. This is a very important debate to some people. To people like myself, and I would actually add, I think the majority of Sixer fans don't find this debate that important or that captivating. We're not going to visit people's pages who may praise Nikola Jokic, and then go out there and say, no, Joel Embiid is better. Though I know on my page I find that happen sometimes if I talk about Embiid, that someone's going to come on there and say, Nikola Jokic is better. The truth is, it's actually not that easy for me to say who is the better player because of the way I look at basketball, but I would say, had I been offered, let's say Denver Nuggets was to call the Sixers up and let's say I'm the general manager of the 76ers and they offer Nikola Jokic for Joel Embiid. Sure, that won't happen, but let's say they did. Would I trade Embiid for Nikola Jokic? And the answer is no. That's the best way I will put it. And I'll give a few reasons here. When we look at the players on paper, Nikola Jokic versus Joel Embiid. Nikola Jokic, since 2015 to 2021, he's a career average 19.3 points per game, 10.3 rebounds per game, and 6.2 for a career. Joel Embiid is a career 25.6 points a game, 11.3 rebounds, 3.3 assists. This is on the offensive side. So we see a consistent theme here. Nikola Jokic is the better passer. And this is why he has more assists. Or should I say, he's the guy that focuses on passing as being an integral part of his game. Right? So that results in more assists. And then in the eye test, you could tell he is the better passer of the two. Joel Embiid, he scores a career 6 points better than Jokic. So for me, he's the better scorer. Though Jokic does have a higher field goal percentage, he does it at a more efficient clip, which I would say doesn't mean you're a better scorer. It means the fundamental way in which you score is a more efficient way of going about it. Some people prefer that. Some don't. For me, I don't mind the little bit of less efficiency when you look at the fact that you're only talking about Joel Embiid is still around 50%, Jokic is around 53%, right? So there's a little bit more efficiency there. But when you look at the array of shots that Joel Embiid takes, how much he seeks out contact and looking for and ones, this plays into your field goal percentage. Also, he takes more fadeaway shots and difficult shots and the types of shots that in big games you may have to make when you're going up against defenses that tend to smother. Okay? Jokic's way of dealing with that is through his passing. Okay? So there's two different approaches to basketball here. It's difficult to say who's the better player. Similar to if I was to look at LeBron James and Kevin Durant. On paper, it's difficult to determine who's the better player unless you're just talking about raw numbers. But raw numbers for me lends more information to the style of play of the person as opposed to skill, if that makes sense. Skill and ability, if that makes sense. Now, we're going to talk about this particular season. Nikola Jokic gives us 25.9 points per game, 13.8 rebounds, 8.1 assists, which are excellent numbers and are MVP type of numbers, without a doubt. Joel Embiid this season is a 29.7% point scorer, 11.2 rebounds, and 4.3 assists. So we see Joel Embiid this year is above his assist average. He's down on his rebound average is about the same because he's a career 11.3 and now he's 11.3. Whereas Jokic is above his average, his career average in rebounds. And he's actually averaging a few more rebounds than Joel Embiid. Though I would not say this makes him a better rebounder. I would have to see them play against each other and go head up to know who's the better rebounder. Like Joel Embiid goes after more block shots. A number of different things that I think contributes to it. But one thing I will say about Jokic, he is a great rebounder and he does have great fundamentals. He sticks to his box outs, all of those things. Now Joel Embiid is still scoring better, okay, at a higher clip. So that's what you're looking at. But I would be remiss if we didn't deal with the defensive side of the ball. All right. Before I say this, in reality, when you're talking about on the ball, one-on-one defense, there is no comparison between these two men. One is more athletic than the other, and that lends too much of that. Some Jokic people will argue the defensive rating, Okay. We can do that. Jokic, because Jokic now has a decent defensive rating. He's about 103 now. Okay. But they would be ignoring like just last year. This season isn't done. And then last year, Jokic was a 109.3 to Joel Embiid's 103.9, which may not seem like a big deal, but there is. Rudy Gobert, his defensive rating is typically around 101, okay? And Joel Embiid's 103, which makes him 2 points away from Rudy Gobert. Jokic was a 109. But I will be honest, his defensive rating has gotten better now. But we shouldn't be deceived by this, okay? When we look at what they do on defense, you have to look at the style of defense that both teams play. For example, there are times when Joel Embiid was put out there one-on-one with guys like Trae Young and James Harden and people like that. And for a limited amount of time, he can stay in front of those guys. He can let them not get past him. He has that ability. Jokic, we already know. If he has a guy like that on him, he's going to get J'd up for a three. He's going to get flu pass, whatever. So this is really the eye test when we talk about real on-ball defense. Now, we're talking off-the-ball defense, talking about help defense. Jokic is a very good help defender as long as he's able to stay in his lane where he is. So I'm not going to get up here and say he's trash at defense. But we have to admit, when it comes to shot blocking, which is very important, and rim protecting, Nikola Jokic has never averaged more than one block per season. He's never even averaged one block a game, ever, in his whole career. He's always 0.8, 0.7, 0.6. He's never averaged a whole block per game. Where Joel Embiid is always over a block per game. And in some seasons, he averaged actually 2 blocks per game. And I think he's capable of more, but I know he doesn't put the effort all the time because of what's happening, the offensive load that he shoulders. No excuse, but these are just facts that you know from watching. So the verdict is, like, Jokic doesn't kill your team on defense. He's just not going to do anything special. He's going to be average, and there's no comparison between these two men in defense. Joel Embiid wins that miles away, which is why I wouldn't make a trade for Jokic. Defense is very important to me. All right. Now, why does this not matter to me? It's because, honestly, for me, the most important thing is winning and winning a title. The Nikola Jokic debate is not relevant to me because the Denver Nuggets play in the Western Conference and the Philadelphia 76ers play in the Eastern Conference. Were the Denver Nuggets, say, Boston or Miami, or a team that was a direct threat to us not making the finals, I would be more concerned about it. If Nikola Jokic was a player that Joel Embiid had to get over the hump, and I would care more about it. See, me, I'm into the sport for competition. I'm not into the sport for, fantasy basketball, who's going to score more, who's going to put up the better stats. That isn't my thing. My thing is, if our two teams meet, can my guy win his match against your guy? And I'm pretty confident that Joel Embiid would do well against Nikola Jokic. That's why it's not a big deal for me. Perhaps if Denver can make the finals, which I kind of think they can't, and we make the finals, then I would be more concerned about this Nikola Jokic-Joel Embiid debate. I would probably have more material out on it, and I would actually care more about it. But as it stands right now, Denver got bigger problems than worrying about whether or not Nikola Jokic is better than Joel Embiid. And as far as the MVP title or MVP awards, the MVP award is good on your resume. When it's all said and done, we look back at whether or not a person is worthy of the Hall of Fame, whether or not we debate legacy. This is where it's important. But I personally don't respect it that much because I understand it's mostly fueled by media narrative. Individuals who don't play basketball are not basketball experts necessarily, who just write articles. Their skill is writing articles, communication, and things like that, debating on who they wrote more stories about throughout the season. Has very little to do with who's the best player. This is why When Michael Jordan played, he only won 6, when really you could argue he should have won 10 or 11. Same with LeBron James, who won 5. He really should have won about 8, with the exception of a couple years that Steph Curry had, a couple years, that year Durant had. Other than that, you could always give it to him, you see. So that's why I don't care that much about it. The only reason I want to see Joel Embiid win the MVP award this year is because Jokic got it last year. Their numbers are virtually the same. You can go either or and not be wrong either way. And because Joel Embiid himself has stated that he wants it. And whatever gives me the best form of Joel Embiid in the playoffs and going forward, that's what I want. So that's all I got, fellas. Till next time, peace.